T. Russell Hunter. And most of you guys know him because you were here yesterday, so I won't go through the whole thing, but he runs an organization called freethestates.org, I believe. And he was also one of the prominent abolitionists to kind of ignite the abolitionist movement here in America. And so he's done a lot for the cause of abolition, continues to. And so we are really, again, very, very grateful, very blessed to have him. And so please help me welcome again, Mr. T. Russell Hunter.
Yeah, man. Well, I have to do it from over here. You guys are everywhere, so it'll work. All right, so that previous talk was pretty intense. Well, given that there is a reality to the fact that mothers and fathers, just parents, are murdering their children in this country under the covering of laws, abolitionists advocating consistent, biblically consistent, logical, legally consistent bills to try to curtail this, to try to bring preborn human beings under the protection of the law, have to kind of work at the state level and deal with the fact that most of the bills being put forward by pro-lifers are not in any way consistent with the idea that abortion is murder. So yesterday I did a talk and it was very historical, it was very, I don't know, it wasn't really legislative lobbyist, but this is, today's talk, this is kind of the bread and butter. I love the history stuff, but this is what we do at Free the States. So when I say something like I'm a lobbyist, the organization Free the States will only get behind and support bills which meet the criteria of a true abolition bill. So that's what this talk is designed to do. It's a very fancy word, right? Demarcating, or it's a $20 word or whatever. Demarcating, that is, let's talk about the distinguishing features of a pro-life bill versus an abolition bill. Because oftentimes a bill will be put forward, you'll see it on Facebook, LifeSite News will be sharing it, they'll call it an abortion ban, and you'll be tempted to be like, woohoo, Alabama has banned abortion, or this is great, we're ending abortion. But if you really examine the bill, generally speaking, if it's being promoted by something like LifeSite News, isn't an abolition bill. So this talk is in line with everything that's been said so far, but it's designed to help you distinguish a good bill from a bad bill, an abolitionist bill from a regulatory bill, which we're calling a pro-life bill, what has traditionally been a pro-life bill. Now, there have been about 300 pro-life bills passed in the United States of America. There have not been any abolition bills passed, because if there were abolition bills passed, we probably wouldn't be having conferences like this. But we are gaining ground. Amen. So let's just jump into it. It's going to be very fast. All right? So right now, we just want to start out very simply, pro-life and abolition. The bill I want to start describing first off is an abolition bill. An abolition bill, very simply stated, like if we're going to focus on what an abolition bill seeks, like what is its goal? What is it trying to do? Well, it seeks the total and immediate abolition of abortion as murder. The key words here are total and immediate, abolition, and abortion as murder. Like it's treating abortion as murder, and it's seeking to totally and immediately abolish it. The total, very clear, total means no exceptions. So we're talking about every form of abortion. Not like we're going to abolish a certain kind of abortion, or we're going to abolish abortion for a certain set of circumstances, but we're going to make exception for like rape or incest, the life of the mother. It's any abortion is going to be abolished. So total just means no exceptions. Immediate doesn't really mean overnight, like, just writing immediate makes it happen overnight. The reason we say total and immediate is we're trying to make it clear that the bill isn't seeking an incremental gain. The bill is seeking an entire gain. abortion in and of itself, not abortion at 20 weeks, beating heart, first trimester, second, going back. The way that abolitionists have generally been able to explain this simply is by asking folks to look at this tree analogy. Some of y'all, many of y'all here have probably seen this, but if you want to compare the way an abolitionist legislator or an abolitionist in general and a pro-lifer, think of abortion as a tree. Abortion, this being the tree, you've got chemical abortions, you've got surgical abortions, all right? These are two different forms of abortion. The chemical abortion, there's all sorts of ways that you can chemically destroy the child. Now, the ones that are chemical abortions, like at abortion clinics, are generally like RU486 or some combination of chemicals like that, but there are various other chemical abortifacients that are even available over the counter at Walgreens and stuff, but these are chemical methods of destroying image bearers, preborn neighbors in the womb. There's also surgical abortions, and these are abortions wherein some kind of implement or tool is used to generally dismember the child. But under dismemberment abortions, you actually have various kinds. You have curettage abortions. This is where an implement is used to sort of scrape the child from the uterine wall and remove them with just the abortionist is literally scraping them out of the womb, the one place they're able to live. There's suction abortions, which will be used a little bit later in the process, but can be used early on, and this is where a high-powered vacuum aspirator is used to dismember and suck the child out of the womb. Then there are forceps abortions. This is when the child is a little bit bigger. You can't just suck them out, you can't just scrape them out. You actually literally have to reach in there with forceps and pull them apart piece by piece and remove them. And then there are abortions that are combinations of these things. So you got your chemical abortions, your dismemberment abortions, and then you also have various kinds of late-term abortions. Abortions where you will kill the child with a syringe and then remove their body, or induce labor and kill the child when it's partially out. And so these are all different kinds of abortion. Now, the abolitionist and the pro-lifer are trying to deal with this wicked tree and this murderous thing, but when they look at it, an abolitionist looks at the tree and says, it's all murder, right? Chemical, surgical, late term, early, with forceps, with RU486, it's all murder because an image bearer is being destroyed. It doesn't matter how bloody it is, and it doesn't matter how violent, it doesn't matter how much pain it causes, it's all murder. The abolitionist, as we talked about yesterday, because it comes from a biblical point of view, and that means if there's an image bearer, to destroy them and take their life is an affront to God, an affront to His word, and therefore ought to be prohibited as murder. So the abolitionist says, we're not going to look at all these different kinds of abortions and go after one branch. We're going to go like the pro-lifer does, which if you look at pro-life legislation, they usually will identify something, like let's lop off late term, or let's go for this kind of a dismemberment, or this kind of a process. The abolitionist disagrees and says, we're trying to criminalize the murder of preborn children, so we're trying to chop down the entire tree. So that's a good way. The pro-lifer and the abolitionist have an actual different focus. So that's why, that's what not incremental is. Now, abolition as a word, technical, legal, terminological word, if you look it up, it just means the formal act of putting it into something, of annulling it, abrogating it. It's a long-held and used word. As much could be said about it, but by abolition, the bill is written in such a way that it's not just doing something else that's going to implicitly end abortion. It literally writes down, this is murder, it should be prohibited. So abolition is a prohibition type bill, and you can't prohibit something without criminalizing it. So it's an explicit ban of abortion in and of itself, and you can't say, well, you're not allowed to do abortion, you're not allowed to go get an abortion, but if you do it, you're not going to be in trouble. It just literally doesn't work. So an abolition bill is a criminalization of abortion bill. Now, when we talk about abortion as murder, very important, very distinct from from pro-life bills. The abolition bill is really quite simple and elegant. It says the laws against murder should be equally applied to all humans. So if you're saying, what would it look like to abolish abortion in Texas? What are the laws against murder in Texas for murdering a 2-month-old or a 20-year-old or a 80-year-old? Whatever those laws are, consistently apply it to all human beings, because humans in the womb would require that protection as well. So the protection requires prohibition, and prohibition requires justice, and the justice, therefore, requires criminalization. Again, you cannot stop something and say that you're not going to get in trouble if you do it at the same time. It is not how the law works. So an abolition bill seeks equal justice under the law, which sadly is written on the Supreme Court. So that's the basic thing. Okay, so that's the basic thing that an abolition bill is focusing on, but criminalization being sort of the main sort of hang-up for people, we should talk about why it is that an abolition bill is controversial, why it is that pro-life legislators sort of shy away from them, don't want to do them, and why the culture has a problem. But why it's necessary and why we have to do it. Criminalization is the key thing challenging the essential holding of Roe v. Wade. The essential holding of Roe v. Wade was that in the penumbras of the privacy clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, a mother has the right to terminate her pregnancy. That's all euphemistic for saying that there's a constitutional right to murder your children in the womb. An abolition bill does not sort of accept that and try to work within it. It literally says that's false, there is no constitutional right to murder a child in the womb, and challenges that full on. So we would argue that contrary to what has been stated and accepted by our culture of death, the Supreme Court is just dead wrong. They're dead wrong. There is no right to murder children anywhere in the Constitution. They've made it up. It's a complete legal fiction. Now, but to be clear, it's not just that Roe is wrong because it's unconstitutional. Roe is wrong because it's unjust. If it were in the Constitution would have to be amended. But in this case, different from the days whenever we were trying to abolish slavery, slavery was protected by the Constitution, and the Constitution therefore had to be amended with the 13th Amendment. The Constitution does not in any way, shape, or form need to be amended. It already possesses within it 5th Amendment, 14th Amendment, the protection of every person. So we do not have to amend the Constitution. But if the right to murder babies was constitutional, well, we'd have to just say the Constitution's wrong, and we would have to defy the Constitution. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. The right to murder human beings is nowhere to be found in the Constitution, period. So an abolitionist bill disagrees with the judicial rulings of the past 47 years and says, we know you said that it was constitutional, but you're wrong and you don't make laws. We're going to make laws in our state that are consistent with the Constitution and not try to submit to your court ruling. So this happens to be consistent with what you learn in 3rd grade or 5th grade civics. Courts don't make laws. Courts issue opinions, and whenever the opinions are wrong, you have to be able to uphold and defend the Constitution as you've sworn as someone holding office in this country, and even uphold and defend the Constitution in the face of court rulings which are unjust and unconstitutional. So the abolitionist bill at a state level is a nullification bill. It is a state sovereignty bill. Nullification because you're saying, no, you've ruled this way, there are federal protections of abortion, these are false, we're going to go with the Constitution against what you're ruling, and we're going to do that as a state, knowingly in the face of federal tyranny. So this is why abolition bills are harder, and this is a very, very clear and distinct difference between an abolition bill and a pro-life bill. So, challenges the essential holding without compromise, without delay, and looks at the thing, and an abolition bill, unlike a pro-life bill, actually upholds and defends the Constitution. The Constitution in the 10th Amendment actually says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. The Constitution actually says your state can pass laws regarding murder, and it's not up to the federal government. So it's a constitutionally, it's founded in a very constitutional theory. We'll get into pro-life one, why it's not. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, one of the founding fathers, was very passionate about this nullification, about the right to nullify. The reason he said that every state, which at the beginning, there's the 13 states, every state has a natural right to nullify, is explained in a letter that he wrote, being quoted by many people. It's kind of long, but it's very important. He's writing to a guy who basically is putting forward the view that we all hold, not we, but people in the culture hold today. And it's the idea that the judicial branch sits as the ultimate arbiter of what is and is not constitutional. He says, okay, the judicial branch is supposed to interpret the Constitution and make opinions on things, but it is a very dangerous doctrine to believe that they are the ultimate arbiters. So what you do in the Supreme Court, when a court rules unconstitutional, you must have this right to nullify, to disagree with them, to ignore their rulings. Because judges are as honest as other men, which means not, and not more so. They have with others the same passions for party, for power, and the privilege. Their power, the more dangerous they are. And this is Thomas Jefferson. He's like looking forward. He's like, you can have this small group of men go bad, and they could say whatever they want about the Constitution, and everyone would just have to just follow them. This is a dangerous, dangerous doctrine. And he points out, very rightly, presciently, that corruptions of time and party would lead to despotism. And that's what we've seen. Whenever you have the appointment of a Supreme Court justice, it's a very political thing, right? And it's not meant to be a political thing. It's meant to be these judges who submit to the Constitution, follow it, and make rulings based on what it says. It's not meant to be this political thing where parties are competing over who's in there, because it shouldn't matter, because they should all be making rulings in submission to the text of the Constitution instead of creating things out of thin air. Now when they create things out of thin air, what's the natural right to challenge them? Nullification. So, Thomas Jefferson says this, and this is consistent with, this is the foundation of the United States of America. The 13 colonies, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and started this whole grand experiment, everyone knows, I underline that because it's awesome the way they wrote of the 13 united, and then they were states of America. I just love that, I want to point that out. But when they wrote this document, the very famous opening lines about all men being created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, everyone knows that. But right there, after you follow that to secure these rights, these inalienable rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter, or, lo and behold, abolish it. So, the Declaration of Independence is an abolitionist document, and it's saying that we have to possess the right of nullification in order to secure inalienable rights. So, this is from the very beginning. Now, it's no surprise that the abolitionist movement in the 19th century, this is William Lloyd Garrison here on the side, looked at the Declaration of Independence along with like the New Testament, particularly for him, and this idea that all we're doing when we seek to abolish slavery, all we're doing, our crime, I'll just read it here. We believe in the Declaration of American Independence. All our fanaticism from the beginning to this hour has consisted in this, and meaning just what we say of that declaration. The nation is hypocritical, and we believe in the inalienable rights of man, and that our crime has been that we have refused to compromise these rights to accommodate any party or sect, or sustain any law, constitution, or compact. We shall surely be vindicated at the court of conscience and the tribunal of God. Verdict of posterity will be we're in the right and the nation was in the wrong. So when the nation goes off and the courts go off, you have to be able to stand up and say, we're standing with the truth, with justice, and we're going to defy tyrants. So an abolitionist bill, all of that, in our current state of things, where you've got abortion completely legal in all 50 states, no single state in the United States, no part of the empire that is the United States of America is upholding the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The abolitionist bill, therefore, is in defiance of this tyrannical enslavement to death. So an abolitionist bill, when you do all that stuff, you look at it, and why it's so scary to pro-life legislators is it's asking them, it's asking the states and the governor of that state and the people of that state to interpose on behalf of the humans who are being unjustly and unconstitutionally destroyed. And that interposition is in the face of tyranny. But this is the kind of thing that is necessary. And that is a bill that will lead to actual abolition. Now, it's no wonder that this is not popular with legislators. I hope there aren't any legislators in the room, but they're pretty much the most squeamish, cowardly people on the planet. They're a bunch of people who basically want a popularity contest. And they don't do anything according to principle. They don't want to look for the hard thing. You go into the office and you're like, I'd like you to interpose for preborn human beings and stand up in a way that nobody else in the entire country is. You're literally asking them to be like the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence and died in the War of 1770s, okay? They don't want to do this. They're like, is there something I can do that would make me look like I love babies that doesn't require me to possibly get in trouble or do anything dangerous? Something that doesn't have interposition? Well, that's something that doesn't have interposition is not going to be abolition. And that is what they do. Pro-life bill. Now you're looking at that and you're like, wow, there's so much more over there. And I apologize, but that's not my fault. That's the pro-lifers. So let's look at the pro-life bills. And I promise you, I'm not thinking be nice or be mean. I'm thinking be accurate, okay? This is what I believe is what a pro-life bill seeks to do. If you just study it, what it's seeking to do. And I think many times it's coming from a good heart, right? The pro-lifer, whether you're talking about the supporter, the movement, the lobbyist, the legislator, is seeking to save babies and women from abortion. They are seeking to reduce abortion numbers. So this, like with the other one, it was like total and immediate abolition of abortion as murder, very legal. This is more cultural. It's more, we're going to save babies, and that's an important thing. But then there's also the and women, which Christine talked about, and it's like saving them from abortion, like this thing that's being done to them. And ultimately, maybe abolition down the road, but the reason we're writing this bill now is not to criminalize it as murder, but to reduce the number of abortions that are happening. So the pro-life bill's goal is to do this. And the hundreds of pro-life bills that I've looked at, that's I think a very fair description of what they do. As Christine, she put forward, pro-lifers do have this two-victim strategy, very important to the bills. They're always very conscious of the woman and the child. That's a salient figure. And usually the pro-life bill, everyone that I've generally looked at, is seeking to deal with abortion not totally and immediately, but in increments. So if we go back to, and allows exceptions. So if we go back to the tree, we go back to this murder tree, the pro-lifer there on the right is looking at the tree, we froze, okay, and doing something like this. So a very popular one, at least whenever I started making this diagram, was this so-called Dismemberment Abortion Ban. This is House Resolution 3515 that I'm using here. The Dismemberment Abortion Ban is one that was put forward in Oklahoma, and it was actually upheld by an Oklahoma State judge. And it was a law that was banning the dismemberment of a living unborn child. And if you look at the law, it literally says there in Section A that, let me highlight it here for you, that you cannot tear apart an unborn child one piece at a time through the use of clamps, grasping forceps, tongs, scissors, or similar instruments that, through the convergence of two rigid levers, kills them. So the bill says you cannot use forceps, right? It's a dismemberment abortion ban. That's A in this bill. And I just screenshotted the bill from the legislative, the government's page. So it looks at dismemberment abortions and it says, this branch, you cannot murder children with this branch. So the pro-lifer writes that. Now, B, right? So this is lop off forceps. The pro-lifer lops that off, it falls down. Well, B says, now this does not include an abortion which uses suction to dismember the body of an unborn child by sucking fetal parts into a collection container, unless the actions described in the subparagraph are used to cause the death of an unborn child, but suction is subsequently used to extract fetal parts. So this is a pro-life bill, celebrated and funded by Christians, presented to Christians as a great and glorious thing that literally says, you can, though, suck a baby into pieces and remove them that way. It's called the Dismemberment Abortion Ban, and it literally tells you how to dismember babies. You can't use forceps, but use suction. Now, of course, suction is the preferred method, and the method that the abortionists would actually fight to preserve. But forceps are this political move. So, you still got curettage dismemberment abortions, you still got suction abortions, and you got them protected in your pro-life law. But the idea, though, is that it's going to decrease the number of abortions. Well, you've gotten rid of one way that you're going to kill babies by forceps. The problem is with advances in technology, and if you're wondering from Bradley's talk where the number of abortions go down, that graph corresponds with the proliferation of Plan B. Abortion numbers go down because the number of abortions that can't be recorded go up. So chemical abortions go up. So while you're running around lopping off branches on one side of the tree, what you're seeing is branches growing on the other side, because you're telling the culture, you gotta do it, you gotta make sure you do it before like 14, 16 weeks. Now, the fact of the matter is, and this is according to pro-lifers, pro-choicers, anyone doing research, 88 to 92% of all abortions happen in the first 6 to 8 weeks, not requiring forceps. And 7% of them happen in the second trimester, 14 to 20 weeks, where you can use suction, okay? So the pro-life bill, which is designed to reduce the number of abortions and save babies, actually, and is celebrated, like, I didn't have the time to redraw them, but it's like they hold it up and they celebrate it, like, look what I did, while this awful abortion continues to go on because they didn't go to the root. Doesn't, in the end, do much, because if you look, it's very subtle. He's celebrating this branch, but all it's doing is increasing the number of suction abortions, right? Do it in this method. But a pro-life bill, the way it's written, that's how it works. It focuses on an increment and allows exceptions. So, to put it very frankly, and I know that some people probably have supported these kinds of bills in the past just because you didn't think about it, no one had helped you think about it or something like that. But pro-life bills technically, logically, allow some babies to be aborted in order to save other babies. So A, we're going to save those babies, but B, we're going to allow the other babies to be aborted, and this is a sort of compromise because ultimately we want to reduce abortion numbers, and this is a compromise that we have to do. So pro-lifers will say we've got to compromise, let's get the best that we can, and let's do the most good. So when they defend these bills, that's what they'll say. Now, if we want to translate that, basically what they're saying is we have to practice child sacrifice in the fight against child sacrifice. So abortion is child sacrifice. It's killing some children for other people. Well, you're practicing child sacrifice in the fight against child sacrifice because you're sacrificing all the other children on the tree. So whether they think about it or mean it or anything like that, the whole compromise is key. Child sacrifice is key to a pro-life bill. And it's all being done in the vein of reducing abortion numbers. Now, another commitment of the pro-life bill is to never criminalize the woman. That's what we saw from the Abby Johnson quotes, the Kristen Mercer Hawkins Students for Life quotes in the previous talk. So they are committed to never criminalizing the woman. They should be calling her the mother, but they adopt the world's terminology and say never criminalize the woman. Jeff Leach, the little clip that we just saw, said, I will never support a bill that punitively brings justice to the mother who took the child to be destroyed, or the father, you know. So it's a pro-life bill, the Jeff Leach commitment. This is 100% pro-life approved. It's not like I'm grabbing some rhino that really isn't pro-lifer. This is the guy who speaks at the Texas March for Life, is committed to this, never criminalizing the woman. And really when it comes all down to it, it's just sort of a make a better choice law. So it's not saying mothers aren't allowed to murder their children. It's saying, given that mothers are allowed to murder their children, we're writing a law or putting forward a bill that really is just designed to get the mother to make a better choice. Again, this is just a pro-life bill. So there we have a young lady. She's found herself pregnant. She does not look very happy about it. She's like, what do I do? Well, the pro-life laws that have been put forward and passed do not tell her, thou shalt not murder, you can't murder this child. They say, if you murder this child, you have to have your parental consent. That's one that's passed. If you're going to murder your child, you have to wait, like in the state of Texas, I don't know what it is it 72 hours? It's what? 24. You have to wait 24 hours. Chip a tooth, if you're a man, you generally wait 2 years to get that fixed. But when you set up a dental appointment, you gotta wait 24 hours. But the pro-lifers will put this forward and celebrate it. Because you say, what are you doing? And they're like, well, maybe in that 24 hours, she'll make a better choice. In Oklahoma, it's 72 hours. And so they do this, that's what they're focusing on. So I'm trying to be accurate to what they do. Another one is an ultrasound law. And this is the idea that they're going to require the abortionist to perform an ultrasound, which he already does. But pro-lifers think that, pro-life legislators think that pro-lifers are so stupid and they don't know that abortionists use ultrasounds in the process that they believe that they'll get votes and contributions and love for passing laws that require ultrasounds. Now there are also laws that require ultrasound, like that the mother has to look at an ultrasound. But generally they're kind of like that she be given the choice to look at an ultrasound. So the guy that she's paid, or I guess the lady that she's paid, to murder a child, in some states has to say, would you like to see the ultrasound? Well, she's making a choice. So the pro-life law is actually a pro-choice law, saying, you know, if you choose to do this, you can also choose to look at an ultrasound or not. They also pass educational laws, like you got to have like a sign posted in the abortion clinic saying something about like a website that you can look at. Or maybe in bathrooms in high schools that should say something about prenatal babies being cute or something. So you have like these educational laws. And then you have recently, pro-lifers try to pass a law saying that the abortionist somewhere in his child sacrifice center has to have like a form or a sign saying there's such of a thing. If you take the first pill, you can take a different pill to reverse the abortion. And so pro-lifers kind of focus on that sort of thing. One of them that's kind of gained ground in Oklahoma and passed is called HB 2592, and this is the Choosing Childbirth Act. So this is a pro-life bill, unabashedly a pro-choice bill, Choosing Childbirth Act. And if we want to look at that, it's basically the State Department says, you know, we're gonna like, you know, tax people and apportion $2 million to the creation of like websites or materials that give women more information about where babies come from, because again, the pro-lifer thinks that women don't generally know where babies come from. So they raise money to try to help people choose childbirth. And so that's the kind of bill, just so you can understand, that pro-lifers are doing. Again, all in the vein of reducing abortion numbers. Because the pro-lifer, different from the abolitionist, is doing all this, not ignoring Roe, but until Roe is overturned. So compromise is key. The focus is on getting them to choose better, and therefore it's not criminalizing abortion or abolishing abortion, it's actually regulating abortion. What kind of abortions can be done, and what the industry has to do to make itself clean. So regulating, you can regulate the age at which an abortion happens, the stage, the kind of methods, the reason given for abortion. Like you can go get an abortion for any child just because you don't want them, but you can't say you're killing them because they have Down syndrome, for instance. Or you can't say, like if you want to kill your baby because they're a boy and you want a girl, you can't say that's why you're doing it. You just got to say, I don't want the baby. So they'll regulate those types of things for the mother. Now they'll regulate the abortion in various ways, like who can perform abortions, like what kind of license you have to have, whether you have visiting privileges, when they have to be performed. Like, you know, states will say you have to perform in certain periods, how they're to be performed, and what must be done before, like the ultrasound, and where abortions may be performed, such as like HB2 in Texas. If you're going to murder a child, you've got to be close to a hospital, just in case you start murdering the mother on accident, so you can help her. So it's all about regulating the industry, making it safer, making it cleaner, and hopefully, as a result, reducing abortion numbers. So who can perform abortions is the one that's popular in Oklahoma. This is what the pro-lifers do instead of abolishing it. It's not saying, if you want to think about it, you're saying who can perform abortions. You're not even dealing with the tree. You're dealing with something else, right? You're saying, we're not doing anything with the tree. You can murder children, but you got to have a particular kind of license. And that's what HB 1182 was. They passed it in Oklahoma instead of Senate Bill 13 to criminalize abortion, and they therefore did this sort of thing. So a lot of times pro-life bills aren't even doing anything with the tree. They're just sort of messing around with something else, and then they tell people they're doing it because they're anti-abortion. Again, they'll say, we're trying to get the best that we can get. So HB 1182 is put forward this year, as well as Senate Bill 13. I hope most of you followed Senate Bill 13. That was the Abolition of Abortion in Oklahoma Act, pretty much identical to the one that was in Texas. The abolitionist says, let's chop down the tree, and they say, we can't chop down the tree, we've got to do the best that we can get, which is just revoking their medical licenses. It's going to implicitly abolish abortion. So they put forward HB 1182 in the legislature, and the votes against it are 21, and the votes for it are 71. So, and if you go through and ask them, why did you vote for HB 1182? The 71 people who said that they voted it, they'll say, because I'm pro-life and I'm against abortion. So you had 71 people willing to pass this bill, and then this is basically the Republicans and the Democrats in Oklahoma. in the House. So the best that we can get is the excuse that's used. But this isn't the best that you can get. The best that you can get is actually the Abolition Act. If you put it forward and the pro-lifer was, as I'm saying, if the pro-lifer was an abolitionist and was seeking to criminalize abortion, this is what you would have. But if the pro-lifer is, as I claim, and as logic and history and all factual knowledge and examination of the subject claims, doesn't actually support abolition, and so would not vote this way. So they put forward that. There's other ones that they'll put forward, and we'll see the same thing. In the Senate, they put forward a wrongful death suit, basically saying that people could sue the abortionist if the abortionist didn't follow certain regulations. This overwhelmingly passed in the Senate, went to the governor to be signed, and so you've got 37 for it and 9 against it, and so again, that would have been, and then the House approved it 76 to 18, and that would have been all that was necessary to pass Senate Bill 13, which would have been chopping down the tree. So a pro-life bill does this other thing, which is like so far down the hill that it doesn't seem to matter. Another thing that pro-lifers will do is they'll, instead of dealing with abortion and trying to criminalize it, they'll do something like, let's defund abortion, right? They'll pass bills saying no tax money for abortion. Like, you're gonna murder babies, but not with my money. Sort of keep my own hands clean, sort of thing. Again, because the thought is that it's going to reduce the abortion numbers. Now, believing as we believe, being biblical Christians, we don't think people are getting abortions because the government pays for them. We think people are getting abortions because they're sinners who practice child sacrifice in disobedience to God. So that is pro-life bill. Now, all of this, though, given this never criminalized a woman, which, if you'll remember with the abolition one, challenged this central dogma of Roe v. Wade. The central holding of Roe v. Wade was that women have the right to do this. All of this that pro-lifers do is also committed to never criminalizing a woman. As Jeff Leach and Abby Johnson and others have said, it's to punish the abortionists who violate the regulations, or to shut down the abortion clinics who violate the regulations. So they are regulatory bills that accept the right to abortion. Now, while this is all being done for the past 47 years, medical advances have happened, the internet has blown up, and you can basically just get an abortion online. You get on the internet, you say, I want to get an abortion, but I'd rather not have to walk by people with signs preaching the gospel, and you can just order them. And that's becoming increasingly popular, and there's no criminalization for it. And who are you going to punish if the only person you're allowed to punish is the abortionist? It's literally someone ordering a pill from India or something like that. So all this is being done, and the mother is thinking, maybe I can just get it online. Now, all of it is done working within the parameters of Roe v. Wade and KCB Planned Parenthood, not against it, but within it. That's why never criminalize a woman. That was the key to Roe v. Wade. And KCB Planned Parenthood allows regulations of the abortionist and the abortion clinic, so long as you don't put an undue burden on the mother's right to terminate her child. So the pro-life bill is seeking to reduce abortion, lop off these branches, may or may not be doing anything, is, unfortunately, and I don't think many of the pro-lifers admit to this, that know this, it's basically saying, yeah, abortion is a constitutional right, unfortunately. So they look at the Supreme Court, equal justice under the law, and they say, well, the Supreme Court has ruled. Yes, Roe is unjust, right? But instead of ergo nullification, it's Roe is unjust, but the courts have ruled. What's actually unconstitutional, according to the pro-lifer, is abolition. So let's look at that. Make sure I'm not making this up or misrepresenting any of these people. Does anyone know who that is there on the left, besides Daryl? That there is Scott Klusendorf. He is, by all people you would survey, kind of the leading apologist of the pro-life movement. does all the sort of pro-life apologetics books, does all these seminars. He's their go-to guy. Like, you know, defend our bills, argue for our view, get people to understand. So this is who everyone goes to for training. He says, yes, Roe is unjust, but courts have ruled. In an article published, I guess, by Desiring God, among some others, Scott Klusendorf says, this is indirect, he's engaging with me, actually. So this is Scott Klusendorf writing, you know, the federal courts have already decided in Roe v. Wade and the Casey decision, just as I'm saying, that no unborn children have the right to life. That's the central holding. They already dictated that from on high. So the pro-lifer, the Supreme Court has dictated no child has the right to life. Pro-life advocates would stop it immediately if they could. Again, this article was written in response to something that we did. They are not regulationists, which is what we call them, because that's what they are, who decide which babies live and which die, which is what they do. Forceps, suction, age, stages of development. They're not regulationists. Pro-lifers don't have that power. They work to pursue the good and limit the evil insofar as possible, given current legal realities. So I am not lying about them or misrepresenting them or whatsoever. They're trying to do as much good as they can within certain possibilities, because one of the things that they cannot do is nullification. Stand up and just say, no, the whole thing is unjust. Now you say, well, what do they say is so they say abortion is unfortunately constitutional, we gotta do what we gotta do. Well, they go further. They say actually abolishing it, criminalizing it, is unconstitutional. Some people say, no, they don't say that. Well, this is the most popular pro-lifer on the planet, Abby Johnson. Whenever HB 948 was put forward in Texas, people literally asked her, abolitionists, this is, you know, pro-life, there's abolition talk. Do you support the Abolition of Abortion in Texas Act? I do not support this bill because it is unconstitutional. Criminalizing abortion is unconstitutional. We have made great strides in Texas by passing constitutional legislation that works. I also do not support any legislation that punishes women. Again, very accurate as to what I said a pro-life bill is, and they're trying to pass something within what they say is the Constitution. But there's no right to murder your children in the Constitution. They mean, when they say the Constitution, what the courts have said. So contrary to the abolition bill, is it a nullification bill? Absolutely not. Is it a state sovereignty bill? Absolutely not. The states can't nullify, the states can't uphold the Constitution. The courts have decreed from on high. Pro-lifers, that's their bill. So what is a pro-life bill doing? Even though it seeks to limit abortion and regulate, make it safer for women, all those things, which could be coming from a good motive, what do they ultimately do? Where the abolition bill ultimately was sort of seeking justice, what do they ultimately do? They ultimately comply with the courts until Roe is repealed. And that is why, as Bradley talked about yesterday, there's such a focus on electing a pro-life president who will appoint pro-life justices, who will overturn Roe v. Wade, and then, after Roe v. Wade is overturned, then we can do something. But we're not going to do anything until then. So, what do pro-lifers suggest you do? Vote for pro-life presidents. That's their strategy, because it all comes down to changing the courts. So all this stuff that they do is, they know that it doesn't really do anything to criminalize abortion, so vote for pro-life politicians, give to pro-life organizations, hence 47 years of legally practiced child sacrifice and the growth of a pro-life industry. The Babylon Bee, you guys pay attention to the Babylon Bee, right? Factually inaccurate, but morally correct, at least their subtitle. The Babylon Bee put this out like as it was funny. They're like, it's like a pro-lifer like going like this, and it says, pro-life politicians worry about what will happen if they actually abolish abortion. Because how are we going to get all the Christians to vote for us? Where are we going to get the money? How are we going to stir people up? So the Babylon Bee does this, but then also like Newsweek and Times, and the New York Times. start running these op-eds from people going, yeah, we don't want to abolish abortion because it's our golden egg. I don't know, it's our golden goose, right? This is the means. The Democrats use minorities to get votes. The conservatives use Christians to get votes. Democrats don't care about minorities. Republicans don't care about Christians. Okay, sorry, that's controversial, but I believe it. Okay, so all of this, that big diagram, instead of seeking to abolish abortion, actually delays abolition and is rooted not in no compromise, but in compliance. So those are the two bills. We got a pro-life bill, we got an abolition bill. I hope it's very clear. I hope you believe that this is very accurate. And you should know that it is true, and there's no sense in lying about it, that the pro-life bill is the popular bill. It has all the support. This is the bill that the preachers tell the people to support. This is the bill that the Republican Party tells you to get behind. As we've seen in multiple states where abolitionists have bills, this is what they favor because it is key to keeping things as they are. It protects and defends the status quo. And as long as we can sell the pro-life bill as the lesser of evils, we'll be able to keep in business. And the abolition bill is smaller in support. It's growing every day. But our job, and I'm not just saying like our job like free the states, but Love of Truth Ministries, the candidates for the presidency, the abolitionists on the street, the abolitionist soccer mom. The job of the abolitionist is generally the growth and spread of this kind of information so that people can properly demarcate between who's good and who's bad. This same thinking could be used for presidential candidates. You've got a presidential candidate who wants to be constitutional, abolish abortion as murder, right? And uphold the Constitution instead of the court, versus one who just wants to be pro-life with exceptions, reducing abortion, and just make statements, but not challenge the court, but use the idea of appointing court justices to get votes. The same criteria about bills at the state level can be used for whether you support candidate A or candidate B. Or usually there's more than two candidates, but we all know the way the game's played, they try to make it about two. But the more times that we can take these things, like pro-life bills, abolition bills, pro-life candidates, abolitionist candidates, and begin to talk about these things, it is growing. The abolition bills are gaining. We actually do have, in the state of Oklahoma, abolitionist candidates running as abolitionists against pro-lifers and winning. The Southern Baptist denomination, which is the largest denomination in the state of Oklahoma, met and said, we are not going to be pro-lifers, we're going to be abolitionists, right? The line was drawn and they said, this is what we're going to do. So that is happening. The reason it happens is because we're explaining all this stuff and not leaving people deluded and deceived. So this, I think I made this at the beginning of the year, and it's actually increased quite a bit. The number of abolition bills being put forward in this coming year will be greater than the number put forward in the previous year. And as these things grow, the accumulation, whether a state passes one or not, which ultimately I do believe you got to have a state nullify, uphold the Constitution against the courts, and that's the sort of thing that really does create the cultural conversation. And eventually, if you have a state say, as like Oklahoma, can you guys like smoke pot here in Texas for medicinal reasons? Oh, really? How enlightened are you? No. So, did you know that the Supreme Court has ruled that a state cannot allow the distribution of marijuana for medical or recreational use? But the people want marijuana. So you know what they tell the Supreme Court? We're ignoring you, right? If pro-lifers would love babies as much as potheads like weed, they would nullify these opinions. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get states to basically do for preborn humans what Colorado and Oklahoma and I guess Texas, I didn't know y'all had done that.
We might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. In Oklahoma, you have more weed shops than you have donut shops. And there's a lot of donut shops. I mean, it's Oklahoma. So, but they have to, like, they can't use credit cards and they can't use certain banks. It's all going to be cash and they got to keep it out of the feds. The state is willfully going against federal law and Supreme Court rulings to have the right to smoke marijuana or eating gummy bears or whatever. So, those are the differences. It's not just the bill, though. Some people might say it's all about the bill. When you write a bill saying we're seeking to criminalize abortion without compromise, without exception, totally and immediately, in the face of an unjust, unconstitutional decree, you're not just passing that abolitionist legislation, you're passing the whole sentiment behind it. That the governor would sign this, that the people would get behind it. So we have a lot of work to do and a lot of people doing it, and that includes the next speakers. So, thank you. That's hopefully helpful.
All right. Thank you.